Hello and welcome to the Sex Within Marriage podcast. I'm JD from uncoveringintimacy.com, and we help couples build intimacy that strengthens their marriage. And there's maybe something you wish were different about your sex life. Maybe you want more of something or less of something or just something different. And you haven't said it. Maybe you've tried it before and it didn't land well. Maybe you're not sure how to bring it up without sounding like a complaint. Or maybe you've quietly decided that some things are just better left unsaid. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. We surveyed over 1,000 married Christians about their sexual relationship, and one pattern showed up so consistently it's hard to ignore. Couples who talk openly about sex report dramatically higher satisfaction than those who can't. We're talking about gaps of nearly 2 full points on a 5-point scale. And it didn't matter which activity you were looking at. The pattern held every single time. So today we're going to dig into why so many couples are living in that silence, what it's actually costing them, and what the data suggests about how to change it. In our survey, we asked them about manual sex, oral sex, and mutual masturbation. And across all three, the same pattern emerged without exception, in nearly identical numbers. 3 different activities, 3 different questions, the same result every single time. And it's not just one activity. What makes this finding particularly striking is how consistent it is. It would be easy to chalk up the oral sex findings, which we covered in a previous post, to something specific about that activity. Oral sex carries its own emotional weight for a lot of couples, so maybe the communication gap there is a special case. But manual sex and mutual masturbation, these are activities that couples often treat as kind of lower stakes, less loaded. And yet the communication pattern predicts satisfaction just as strongly across all of them. The correlation between communication comfort and sexual satisfaction is a strong, consistent relationship, not a fluke. And what this suggests is that the issue isn't really about any specific sexual activity. It's about whether the couple has built a marriage where talking about sex is possible at all. So how many people are actually talking about their sex lives? Only about 37% of respondents described themselves as very comfortable discussing manual sex with their spouse. For oral sex, it was about 36%, and mutual masturbation had dropped to about 32%. If you want to see the charts, click on the link in the show notes, and you can go check them out on the website. But what this means is that the majority of married couples in our sample are navigating their sex lives with some degree of hesitation, awkwardness, or outright avoidance when it comes to talking about what they want. Those that wanted to discuss but felt stuck, those numbers tell their own story. For mutual masturbation alone, 10% of respondents said that they want to discuss it but they haven't. Another 8% said that they want to but don't know how. That's nearly 1 in 5 people sitting on something that they'd like to say and haven't. Across all 3 activities, there are people who want this conversation and simply haven't found a way to get into it. When couples do discuss their preferences openly and in detail, the difference is stark. For manual sex, those who can discuss it openly average about twice as high on overall sexual satisfaction as those who can't. And again, this pattern holds across oral sex and mutual masturbation as well. Now, the data can't tell us which came first, whether open communication leads to better sex or whether couples who are already happier find it easier to talk. That causation likely runs in both directions, but the pattern is consistent enough and the gaps are large enough that something real is going on here. Now, one interesting thing was that the correlation holds even when controlling for how often couples have sex. So it's not simply that more sexually active couples talk more and are also more satisfied. Communication seems to matter independently. And men and women in our sample are fairly similar in their communication comfort levels, which is actually a little surprising. For manual sex, 30% of husbands describe themselves as very comfortable discussing it, compared to 40% of wives. That pattern, again, held for oral sex, though the gap narrowed a bit, and flipped slightly for mutual masturbation, where husbands kind of edged ahead. Also, I found it was interesting that wives being more willing to discuss doesn't mean they're more willing to engage. It just means they're more comfortable having the conversation. In my experience working with couples, men are often less likely to verbalize discontent with their sex life. They might bring it up with me, but they don't see their wife as a safe person to raise it with, or they've given up on raising it. Some will still bring it up, but far more won't. Wives tend to be less worried that an honest conversation will damage the relationship. If a wife is unhappy with her sex life, she is far more likely to let her husband know and push for change. What that means in practice is that both spouses often end up in the same silence, but for different reasons. Husbands are sitting on something that they want but haven't asked for. Wives are more likely to be the ones who could open the door but may not realize it's closed. So if talking about sex is this strongly associated with satisfaction, why aren't more couples doing it? And a few reasons showed up repeatedly in the comments our respondents left. Couples who haven't had the conversation yet often don't know how to start it without feeling like it's a criticism. Saying, I wish we did more of X can easily land as you're not doing enough, even when that's not the intent at all. Some couples had an early attempt that went badly. One spouse said that they felt judged or pressured, and the subject quietly got closed. Years can pass without those being reopened again. And for some people, the silence simply calcified into an assumption that this is just not a conversation our marriage has. The longer it goes unspoken, the more weight it accumulates and the harder it becomes to raise. Now, there is one other group worth mentioning. About 5 to 7% of respondents said that they haven't discussed preferences because they don't think it's necessary. And their satisfaction scores were actually reasonably good, about 3.4 to 3.7 on the sexual satisfaction scale, well above the struggling groups. So there are couples who are doing fine without explicit conversation. Some couples develop a kind of wordless attunement over the years of marriage that works for them. The data isn't saying that every couple needs to have a formal sit down about their sex life. What it is saying is that for couples who are dissatisfied, the absence of open communication is almost always part of the picture. And for the couples who are stuck and want to change something, the conversation is usually the place to start. So if you're dissatisfied, if there's something that you've been sitting on, something you want more of or less of, or just different, the silence is almost certainly part of the problem. And the conversation, as awkward as it might feel, is almost certainly part of the solution. If you're not sure how to open that door, start small. You don't have to tackle everything at once. Pick one thing, one honest sentence, and see what happens when you say it out loud to your spouse. And that's it for today. If this episode resonated with you, and if you want to dig deeper into building that kind of openness in your marriage, head over to uncoveringintimacy.com. There is lots there to help you get started.